Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today, I'm going to be discussing this book, My Beloved Brontosaurus, written by Brian Switek. This cover design is by Neon Cho, the illustration by Mark Stutzman. This one cost me $6.98 at Coaz Books. I've had it on my shelf for a while. But interestingly, I also have a receipt from the probably first owner of this book because it says $16 as the price on the back of the book. And here I see a receipt from Bookshop Santa Cruz, 1520 Pacific Avenue, May 23rd, 2014. And the guy got $5.95 worth of cards, Attack on Titans Volume 12, and My Beloved Brontosaurus on the road with for a pretty good amount by the look of it. $16 was the price of the My Beloved Brontosaurus, which leads me to believe this was brand spanking new. Paid partially in cash, partially in, paid in cash and then got change for it. So that's one of the reasons I like getting used books, is sometimes they have gems like that in it. But also, this book was incredibly fun. I'd seen it at the bookstore at the Albuquerque Museum of Natural History, but I wanted to look for it used, and thankfully I found it at Coaz used. It's an interesting research into dinosaurs and advancements in research, including, of course, the big one, which is that at the time of writing this, the Brontosaurus had finally been brought back into scientific correctness, I guess. What had been called Brontosaurus for the longest time was the head of a different type of dinosaur on the body of a what was believed to be a Camarasaurus. It was two different types of body and head. Brontosaurus, through additional research, it was discovered that there was actually a unique species there. The head was wrong, but the rest of the body and a later discovered head were good enough to be called Brontosaurus, and so it came back into the greater dinosaur lexicon. And some other aspects of this include research into, like, the way dinosaurs were found and researched, the way tracks reveal information about dinosaurs. This is just really interesting. While reading this, I must have seen this receipt in the past and just left it here or moved it around. There's another receipt on May 23rd, 2014. This one, the book was purchased at 11:13. This one was purchased 11:12. The Closet Shopper, 504 Front Street, Santa Cruz, California. $26 spent for clothes and Mose Street, something like that. MDSE Street. So this person got two $12 purchases of clothing, and then with taxes it came out to a certain amount. But this receipt is in here as well. Another, like I said, those kinds of things you see in books, especially used books, are really cool to find. There's this interesting bit about the Tyrannosaurus Sioux, which is a really famous specimen of Tyrannosaurus Rex, where it appears, due to research on the skull, that she was afflicted by a microorganism that infests the mouths and throats of modern hawks. That it may not have been the exact same species, but it's the same type of parasite. And she had that oral infestation that ate away at her jawbones to the point where she may not have been able to eat. In Craig Child's The Animal Dialogues, he talks about having found an ancient, not a fossil, but the skull of a mountain lion that had been aged. She had teeth. The female lion had teeth worn down to nubs. The jaw clearly had signs of arthritis. So Sue, the tyrannosaur, might have had something similar where she was just aged or sick, and she might have died just of natural causes and then fossilized instead of, well, natural causes. Predation would also be natural causes, but in this case, she may have just died from parasitism, from starvation, so that sort of thing. But there's also stories in here about how part of researching fossils is this understanding, or rather a belief, that once a trait is lost in a species, it doesn't grow back in the same mechanism. That birds may eventually evolve something like teeth, but they're never going to have teeth in the same way that dinosaur dentition was. And so we can tell roughly all birds came from the same lineage because they all lost teeth, and none of them have teeth in a manner similar to the fossil record. And one of the things they can also do, and this was a really cool bit of information in this book, was that these scientists were able to determine both the sex of a fossil, determine that it was female, and that it had hatched eggs recently before it died, or shortly before it died, because it had this feature in its bones, in a cross section of its femur, that is similar to what birds go through, in that to generate calcium for their eggshells, they have this protein, I guess, in their marrow that kind of pulls calcium through their femur, through their strongest bones, and adds it to eggshells. And that dinosaurs have a similar pathway, that dinosaurs have the same kind of mechanism, means that, one particular theropod and avian dinosaurs, birds, developed from a ancestor that had it. So if a dinosaur has that feature in its cross section, in a cross section of its bones, they have to be related. And that's a really cool thing to find out, that research into the bones, it might just be that a scientist had never thought of that, to think, hey, maybe this one recently laid eggs. There's this bit here. The first fluffy dinosaur discovery enthralled paleontologists. At the annual Society of Vertebrate Paleontology conference in 1996, scientists circulated a photograph of a small fossil that revealed a mane of fuzz around the dinosaur's back and tail. John Ostrom, who was chiefly responsible for reinvigorating the idea that birds are dinosaurs, was in a state of shock after hearing the news. At long last, a feathery non-avian dinosaur had really been found. This creature, labeled Sinosauropteryx in a technical publication the same year, didn't have feathers suited for flying. The simple dino fuzz covering the creature's body could only have been for display and insulation. The dinosaur lacked the specialized asymmetrical feathers that allow modern birds to take the air. In fact, it would have looked very much like Huxley's hypothetical feathery Compsognathus. The newfound dinosaur pointed to the hypothesis that feathers were not originally for flight, but had evolved for different reasons and were later co-opted. So it discusses that example, then provides some art of that kind of thing. It says, this caption here, thanks to exquisitely preserved skeletons with intact gut contents, we know that fuzzy dinosaurs such as Sinocalliopteryx fed on their feathery neighbors, including other non-avian dinosaurs and early birds. And then it gives the entire link to that, probably now dead link to that art. But, this kind of reminds me, in the same vein, of recent video I saw online involving a scientist who uses sexually explicit content on platforms to kind of fund her own research, because to get actual research money, most scientists kind of have to sell out in some way, and usually it means selling out to governments or selling out to private individuals In this case, she had an interview with a Brazilian, I think, scientist who was looking at what she believed to be fossilized vomit. And sure enough, it had been like a Spinosaurid's vomit that led to the discovery of a type of pterosaur that had been eaten by that theropod. And that pterosaur was only known from fossil specimens, not even in Africa, but even further away than that. So to have this kind of pterosaur fossil in this fossil vomit was really cool. And you think about like that, there's Coelophysis, the Ghost Ranch here in New Mexico, which has so many fossils, including specimens of nesting mothers that had lizard skeletons in her belly, digesting this lizard skeleton. Otherwise, that skeleton would have no business being there. And, it's right in the abdomen. The best bet is that we can research what these dinosaurs were eating through that kind of specimen. And so, My Beloved Brontosaurus is a really cool book researching dinosaurs, newer revelations about dinosaurs, and how those kinds of things are expanding human knowledge and understanding of dinosaurs. I say that, I've got Dinotopia stuff right there, and, just over my right shoulder, the two books from Dinotopia, including the second one, which, the one I've got closer to the edge of frame there, which has specifically, in addition to an autograph, it has an explanation by the author who said, by the artist slash author who says, as he understood more and more about research into dinosaurs, his first example was non-feathered dinosaurs and very of its time research, whereas his later book has a lot of updates. What would a non-avian feathered dinosaur look like? How would the plumage affect social interactions? And so there's examples of, in that book, of like humans wearing certain kinds of dress to emulate the feathers of non-avian feathered dinosaurs. So it builds upon that kind of research and the kind that's in this book, My Beloved Brontosaurus, that expands upon human knowledge and common knowledge about dinosaurs, and just creates a broader perspective of dinosaurs and what they are. So that's one of the cool things about this kind of book, is it really just, you learn a lot, and it's fun to learn. Dinosaurs are always just fun to read about, whether you're an adult or a kid. They're just a cool thing to hear about. So, My Beloved Brontosaurus, I'm glad I spent that $7 on it. It's also cool seeing the purchase history of the person who owned it before me, when they purchased it, where they purchased it, and just the book in general was fun. So, yeah, there's not much else to say about it, but if you've read this book, you would know there's a lot more to say about the book itself, but about this rant in particular, there's not much more to add. Yeah, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.